Supposing you want to give a dinner party, a really marvelous party with exactly the right food for each course and exactly the right wine for each dish. And for once, expense is of no concern. Well, here's how, starting with first course, sit-down dinner, today on the French Chef.
The French Chef is made possible by a grant from the Polaroid Corporation.
Welcome to the French Chef. I'm Julia Child. You know, when I do a sit-down dinner, and I'm going to do all the cooking and serving myself, which usually happens to be the case, and I want a very, very special menu with very, very, very good food. Really, for me, 8 people is the limit. I really would prefer 6. But I want a superb main course, something like a roast tenderloin of beef. And I want a first course and a dessert that are both fantastic, that'll knock 'em dead, but that won't knock me out at the last minute. And of course, I want exactly the right wines, served exactly the right way. So, if you're going to have expensive dinner and good wines, you have to have the right glasses to serve them in. And if you only get one type of glass, which will go for everything, the all-purpose glass, it's this one. And as you notice its shape, it bulges out a little bit in the middle, and then it tapers inward toward the top. Really, it looks like a tulip, and that's exactly what it's called. It's called the tulip-shaped glass. And when you pour into it, you fill it up just about half full, and it holds about 8 ounces, and it gives you plenty of room to twirl and to sniff the delicious bouquets of the wine. And with this glass, you can't go wrong. It's always correct. You can use it for white wine, red wine, champagne, sauterne, anything you can think of. And you can buy them anywhere. Usually wine shops have them, and I've even seen them at the 5 and 10. And it's always correct. Now, if you're going to serve a great big red Burgundy with a big nose, you can use a large glass like this. Here's one, a fairly high one, and here's one that has rather fat-bellied. But as you notice, each one of them comes inward, and that holds in the bouquet and preserves it rather than letting it dissipate. These are I think, are quite fun to have. And now, as for white wines, you don't have to be so serious about the bouquet unless it's a white Burgundy. You could use, this is a charming glass of crystal here. This is a Venetian glass of an old shape. And glass is just for champagne. And look, when you pour into it, the wine goes all the way down to the stem. And the champagne bubbles keep coming up. Some people don't like the idea of having champagne served in a glass with a wide brim, but I think this one is a great deal of fun. And then you have the problem, if you're having several wines, as to where you place them on the table. In this case, we're going to have a white wine to begin with and then a red wine. And you place the white wine or the first wine glass on the outside and then the second wine glass on the inside. And if you're going to have a third wine, you may want to have 3 glasses on the table. I think that's a little too much. I'd rather bring that glass in along with the dessert. And now, table setting. I think it's dreary if you come in and there isn't anything but knives and forks around. I think you do need a plate at each place. If it's a cold first course, you can have all the plates on the table. And if it's a hot one, the way we're going to have it, it's a warm plate that you put in just before the guests come in. And we're going to have a roast as a main course, so I can have a very, very fancy, really rich first course, which is going to be artichoke bottoms stuffed with mushrooms and topped with a sauce of Béarnaise. It's a delicious first course. Some people don't like to drink wine with artichokes, but I don't belong to that school at all. I like to it doesn't have to be a tremendously important wine. And you can have a Pouilly Frisé or Pouilly Fumé. And you want, of course, to chill it. And this is a good trick my husband uses of always opening the wine, not opening, but pulling the cork a little bit first. And whatever corkscrew you use, be sure that you get the point of it right in the very middle of the cork, and then watch very carefully that the shaft of the corkscrew is going down absolutely straight into the bottle. And this idea here is to pull the cork so it's almost out, but not quite, so that when you can just pull the rest of it out with your fingers. And then you can chill it, and then you don't have the bother of trying to open the wines just at the last minute. So that can just pull out by the fingers, and it's very easy to do so, and then chill it. And it needs about 2 or 3 hours of chilling. And now to the artichoke bottoms. And speaking of luxury, this is it. There's your whole artichoke, and there is just the bottom. And as you remember, we'll see, here's the artichoke. That's the raw artichoke part, and this is the cooked one. And how do you get the bottom out of the artichoke? Well, I'll show you how you do it. The professional way to do it is to do them raw. And the first thing you do is to break the stem off. And this is, in case there are any fibers in the stem that are up into the bottom, they'll pull out. And then you take the leaves and you take your thumb and you bend them until they snap, and then peel them off. And the reason you do this is to leave as much of the edible part on the bottom of the artichoke as possible. Because if you take the leaf and pull like that, you'd be pulling this little edible part off, and you wouldn't have a very big bottom. And just see that, a bend, and then peel. You can hold with your thumb so that you won't tear that bit of bottom off the heart. And naturally, you have to have very, very fresh artichokes. And when you get artichokes, if you're not going to use them right away, be sure that they're wonderfully crisp and heavy feeling. And then wrap them in wet towels and put them in a plastic bag in the refrigerator. Now, when you've peeled off enough leaves so that with your finger you can feel the top of the bottom. There's your bottom. And you're feeling the top of it there, you take a stainless steel knife, and I think stainless steel is necessary because otherwise it may stain, and cut the top cone of leaves off just about even with the top of the bottom. See, that's what you're doing. And the choke stays in until after you cook the artichoke. And then you turn the artichoke upside down, even off the bottom, and then shave off all the green parts. Matter of fact, I forgot that it discolors quickly, so take a half lemon and keep rubbing the artichoke with the lemon because you don't want it to darken. And then with your little knife, just shave, because the green parts of the artichoke are tough, and you have to shave it down to the tender white part. So just go round and round. Then after you've gotten the main part of the leaves off, you can use a vegetable peeler. And what you're doing is shaving off every bit of the green. And just continue on around and keep rubbing it with lemon. I'm not going to continue with all of that because you get the idea. And then as soon as you've finished with the artichoke, you put it in acidulated water, which means simply that it's water that has 2 tablespoons of lemon juice for every quart. And that keeps the artichokes from discoloring. And now, as always in this country, whenever anyone sees someone taking all the leaves off of artichokes, well, they say you're taking away the best part. So if you want to, you can boil all the leaves that you've taken off, and with a spoon you'll find there's still a little tiny bit of artichoke meat left on those leaves. And if you scrape all the leaves, you'll get maybe about half a tablespoon of artichoke meat. So don't be wasteful. I don't think the Europeans ever do this, but this always makes Americans feel much better about the whole thing. Now you would say, now why don't you use a cooked artichoke? This is a cooked artichoke. And just take the leaves off a cooked artichoke. Wouldn't that be much easier? Well, I'll show you what happens. You take the leaves off, and what happens is that all the edible part of the leaf comes off, and there's practically nothing that remains on the bottom. There you are, just a little tiny bit of a thing, and that was a great big artichoke. See? And when the choke comes out, there's nothing. So I should say QED, do them raw. And then you're going to get a great big artichoke bottom, and that's just what you want. And now you can leave these out. Well, now these have been in here about an hour. They're beginning to turn a little bit. So I would say cook them as soon as possible, and you have to cook them so that they will stay white also. And they're cooked in what's known as a blanc, B-L-A-N-C, which is flour and water and lemon. 1/4 cup of flour and about a cup of water. Beat it in to make a nice smooth paste. And then you want to cook that to make the liaison. We'll add a little more water, and then in will go the artichoke bottoms. And you've probably, if you've ever done salsify or calves tête de veau, you cook them also in a blanc. You use this a blanc for anything that's supposed to be kept white. Bring that up to the boil, and then in that we want 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, and half a lemon is usually about 2 tablespoons. And I certainly think for cooking you should use fresh lemon juice. You can, for the acidulated water, you could use bottled lemon juice. So there's 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, and we are going to have a quart of water after that's come up to the boil, which it just about has. And I'm going to put some boiling water in. And salt, about 1.5 teaspoons of salt should go in there. And then as soon as that comes up to the boil, in go your artichoke bottoms. And you want to be sure to have enough liquid so that the artichoke bottoms are covered. Absolutely exact measurements aren't terribly important. But if you find that you don't have enough liquid, put a little bit more in, and then let them cook at a very slow boil for 30 to 40 minutes until they are tender. And I'll show you how they're tender. There's your artichoke bottom, and it's tender when a knife goes into it easily. And after you've cooked them, you just keep them in the liquid, and you can refrigerate them, and they will keep perfectly for 2 or 3 days, so that you can do them ahead. And now you can fill artichoke bottoms with all kinds of things. If you want them cold, you can fill them à la grecque with, a vinaigrette and vegetables, cold vegetables. You can have lobster mayonnaise, or if it's going to be hot, you can have hot crab. And I'm going to fill them with a mushroom d'Uxelles. We've done this a great deal before, so I'm not doing it again. This is about 1/2 pound of mushrooms, very finely chopped, and then sauteed in butter with a little bit of shallot until they're just cooked 2 or 3 minutes. And then we want to have a bit of flour in. And this you play very much by ear and eye. And we want to have the flour in so that there can be some cream and a little wine in. And half a pound is 2 to 2.5 cups of mushrooms about. Then after the flour has gone in, let it cook for a moment to to cook the flour. And then we'll have a little port wine in, or you could put Madeira. We're going to be having some Madeira with our main course, so I don't want to use it twice, so I'm using a little port. And then a little bit of cream. And then you want to boil it until it reduces and thickens. I think this would look prettier with a green spoon. And a little bit of tarragon is nice, and and salt and pepper, and I'm putting in about 1/4 teaspoon of tarragon. You just play this by ear, and then taste it very carefully, and see what it needs. It's just absolutely a delicious concoction. It's awfully good just the way it is. I don't think it really needs anything else at all. And you may find sometimes if you cook them in a lot of butter that it hasn't thickened up as you'd like, so take some very good quality fresh breadcrumbs if you feel it needs it. And put the breadcrumbs in, and that will thicken it up just a little bit. I've got about 2 tablespoons in there. And then when it's just the consistency that you want, it's ready to use. And the nice thing about a mushroom duxelle is that it freezes perfectly. And so if I'm ever making it at all, I always make quite a bit extra and then freeze it, because it's a marvelous thing to have on hand. Say, if you just want to make some stuffed hard-boiled eggs with a cheese sauce, you can mix the egg yolks in with the duxelle, and you have an absolutely marvelous mixture for the eggs. And now I've got the wrong artichoke bottoms there. Those are the ones that weren't done. Now, these are all cooked, and so you want to take the choke out. There's your artichoke bottom, all cooked. And here's the choke. And at this point is when you take it out. And you have a little teaspoon, and you very gently begin scraping. And as you can see there is the bottom, the naked top of the bottom, gradually being exposed. And if you haven't cooked it quite enough, you wouldn't be able to get the choke out so easily. And scrape around the inside of the leaf. And there you are, just as neat as a pin. And now you want to wash them in cold water. I'm not going to do all of these, but just take them all just before you're going to use them and put them in cold water and then drain them upside down. And now they're ready to fill. And this cooking liquid, you can say you could use that for a soup. Any kind of a cream soup, celery soup, anything like that would work out very nicely. So you don't have to waste anything in this life if you don't want to. Now, I'm going to fill one. So you'll see how that's done. There's your mushroom mixer. But one thing I must tell you, be sure that you shave off the bottom of the artichoke bottom. You can't just shave it off and chop it up into something, because if it doesn't sit solidly, it's going to fall over later on. You will see what I mean. And also, I'm going to put something else in there. So I made a little bit of a depression. And you could serve these just as they are. Just warm them up and then stick them under the broiler with a cheese sauce or some melted cheese on them. Or you could top them with poached eggs. I'm just going to go over here and warm up some poached eggs that I have. These are poached eggs that were sitting in cold water, and I want to put salt them, then put some boiling water on them, and that'll warm them up. They can sit there about 2 or 3 minutes while I'm making my Béarnaise sauce. And you want to warm up the artichoke hearts. And now I'm going to make Béarnaise sauce, and I want a stick and a half, or about 6 ounces of butter that's to come to the rolling, bubbling boil. And we're going to make the sauce in the electric blender. And I'm going to put in 3 egg yolks. We've done Béarnaise before, but not in the blender. 3 egg yolks in the blender, and make sure that this blender is really working properly. There are 3 egg yolks, and you can save the egg whites, freeze them. I'm going to use the egg whites in my dessert. And then they should beat for about 2 or 3 minutes. Not 2 or 3 minutes, about 30 seconds, just to thicken up. And then, as you remember with your Béarnaise, you have the Béarnaise flavoring, which is 1/4 cup each of white wine and vinegar, and a tablespoon of shallots, and a 1/2 teaspoon of tarragon, and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and an 1/8 teaspoon of pepper. That's the same recipe we've always had. And then you boil that down slowly until it's reduced to about 2 tablespoons. And then that goes into your blender. And then your butter is boiling and bubbling, and this is very important because of the butter. The boiling hot butter is going to cook the egg yolks. And this is a very good system a friend told me about, of putting a funnel into the blender, and then in goes your boiling hot butter. Just a little tiny bit at a time, a little dribble. And you pour in as much butter until the machine clogs up. This is a very clever idea that was invented by a clever woman called Anne Saran, and she was the one who did the early blender recipes when they first started out. Now, when you begin hearing it go glug, chug, it's gotten so thick. Look at that. There you are. That's just perfect and ready. And I don't believe in sieving that flavoring, because I think you get much more flavor in your Béarnaise sauce if you put in the whole mixture. Because I have sometimes sieved it out, but I think you want all the shallots and everything beaten up into the sauce. And now we have our silver salver with little toast croutons on it. So we have one warm mushroom cap on each. As you can see, if you're going to top these with eggs, that you'd have a difficult time if you haven't flattened the bottom of the bottoms. And now a hot egg goes on each, and you have to have an impeccably clean towel. Did I say mushroom caps? Well, obviously these are artichoke bottoms. Anyway, there's your warm poached egg, and you've made a little trench that can fit in. And this is that lovely free-form poach that we've used, because you have a much prettier shape, I think. And you always have a towel, because it's terrible to have a wet egg that would wet the beauty of your mushroom d'Uxelles. And then the Béarnaise sauce is going to go on top of that. This makes also a marvelous luncheon dish. And also, as you see, the assembly is very quick. And now we'll have a bit of this lovely sauce Béarnaise over each egg. That spoon is too big. I've made the sauce really very thick. And if a little bit of it dribbles off, that's all right. And it's going to have a topping also. You can use a topping of a fluted mushroom cap. Or if you weren't having truffles with your main course, you could put a truffle on top of that. And I can see I need a little more sauce. And then you can also pass a little more sauce separately. But I'm going to fix all with parsley as usual. Particularly if you've done a little dribble, which very often happens when you're rushing to get things through to get the first course on. But parsley fixes all, thank God. Now, while they're still hot, rush to the dining room. And there we are. I'm going to serve you one. I can see. That sauce was a little bit too thick and it's coming off. This is just a dry run anyway, so that's the useful thing about having a dry run, because you can see, gosh, that sauce isn't going to sit very well on the eggs. So if you're going to, when you're doing it for real, make it a little thinner. But we've had parsley on, so that was fine. And now, the wine, and the host would pour the wine, always pouring a little bit into his own glass in case there was a little bit of cork in it. And then serve the rest of the wine, which is nicely chilled. And pour a little more for himself at the very end. So this is really the kind of first course that I like to start a fancy dinner with, because I think it really sets the tone. And then I always prefer to have a dry run first to make sure everything's going to go well. So that's all for today on The French Chef. This is Julia Child. Bon appétit.
The French Chef has been made possible by a grant from the Polaroid Corporation. Julia Child is co-author of Mastering the Art of French Cooking, Volumes 1 and 2.